Oh, it's great to be here with you, Peter. And I think we first met a little more than 5 years ago at the LA Auto Show, before you had publicly shown the Lucid Air. And over dinner last night, it turns out that over the last 30 years, we have very nearly crossed paths multiple times through the courses of our respective careers. And we just barely missed each other. But tell me, let's start with a bit of your history. How did you decide to get into engineering? What prompted you to go down this path?
Oh gosh, well my passion is just making and designing things, from woodwork to metalwork, anything really, furniture, musical instruments. So I knew I wanted to create and design things, and engineering gave me the formal tools to take that to another level.
You've got quite an impressive CV in the automotive industry, and spent time with Jaguar, Lotus, Chorus, and of course Tesla before Lucid. What were some of the most important lessons that you've learned along the way that got you to where you are today, and what Lucid is doing today?
I think never to give up. I think that was the big one for Lucid. Never to, however tough things get, never ever give up. Keep the faith. I think the other thing is that, and it's only occurred to me recently, to blend a philosophy where you reach for the stars in achieving technical excellence, but you balance that with a pragmatism for execution. Otherwise, you never actually get anything to market. And really, those are rather disparate attributes. The reach for the stars mentality to the sort of bricklayers, we've got to lay those bricks before we have a cup of tea, outlook, get the damn thing out.
Yeah, that was an early lesson I learned in my engineering career, that at some point in every project comes the time when you have to shoot the engineers and get on with the job. Sooner or later, you've got to ship something.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. And we are in production. We've got many delighted customers out there. Lucid Air is out there in the wild, and we're getting terrific feedback.
So let's go into a little bit of the history of the company. When I first became aware of what is now Lucid, it didn't have that name. It was Ativa, and wasn't planning to build cars. It was in the battery business.
It was indeed. Yeah.
How did it get to where it is today?
Well, I think there was a realization from the former CEO, very similar sort of parallel history to Tesla. Tesla started off looking at battery technology, realized the real value add was in an automobile. And Ativa reached out to me and said, look, we want to switch from battery tech to car. We think the opportunity is much bigger. Do you want to come and join and do an electric car? And so that happened 9 years ago.
And the Ativa is still around as a division of Lucid. It's still operating and actually doing some very interesting things, isn't it?
In fact, yes. Actually, the Formula E battery packs that we supply to the world of electric motor racing, it's under our Ativa banner.
Yeah, and for those that have never experienced Formula E, if you weren't crazy about the idea of motorsports because of the noise and the pollution, you should definitely check out a Formula E race. It's actually really surprisingly exciting. I went to my first one in 2019 in New York, and it's a pretty amazing transformation of motorsports with electricity.
Indeed, it's quite an exciting experience. Every race is really frenetic, and pandemonium is guaranteed.
Yeah. So one of the traits that has, I think, made Lucid somewhat distinct among all the myriad of new EV brands out there, as well as the legacy automakers, is a real focus on efficiency. Indeed. And I think, with EVs, a lot of people think, oh, it's zero emissions, so we don't need to worry about the efficiency. But why is efficiency so important?
Oh, don't get me started. I think the key message here is not all EVs are the same, and there is such a thing as gas-guzzling EV. Efficiency is king. There's this view that the world is binary, that gasoline cars are pollutants, and EVs are they're zero emission. But the reality is that there's a world of difference. There's a spectrum of outcome from EV use. And so this is where efficiency is so critical. And we measure efficiency in miles per kilowatt hour. It's like gas mileage, right? Miles per gallon. And it's the new metric. But unlike gas mileage, which really just hurts when you fill up at the pump. But the car's pretty much just as good whether it does good gas mileage or not. It doesn't really affect the enjoyment of the car, the comfort, the room, the performance. Efficiency in an electric car actually influences the product. It's not just the cost of electricity and the environmental impact upon grid generation of that electricity. It actually influences the stature and the caliber of the car. And let me give you an example. Mileage for mileage, range for range. If you have a more efficient car, you can achieve that same range with a smaller battery pack. And that's just super important for a number of reasons. First of all, that smaller pack is lighter, so the car is more nimble and more fun to drive. Also, that smaller battery pack takes up less space, so you can have more legroom, a comfier, a nicer car to experience. But moreover, the biggest single money item on an electric car is the battery pack. A battery pack on a sizable electric car can cost the manufacturer over $20,000. Just that battery pack, think of that. So if you can have a 10% influence on pack size, that can have a $2,000 price influence, and that's not to the customer, that's to the manufacturer. So I really am passionate about using the technology that we developed today for a landmark car like Lucid Air, to having that cascade down to help the proliferation of more affordable electric cars for the mass market in the future. And efficiency is going to be a key driver because it's going to drive down the need for such a big battery pack, and with that, the price of the battery pack and the car.
And of course, if you can get more efficiency, you don't necessarily have to sacrifice range to have that smaller, more affordable battery pack.
Indeed. I mean, the step one that we're doing now with Lucid Air, we got a 520 miles EPA range in the case of the Dream Edition range model. And actually, it was independently tested by Inside EVs. It's a must-see online if you get the chance. Tom Maloney did at a steady 70 miles an hour, he achieved 500 miles range, a real world test. So we're using that to create incredible range, extraordinary range, without such a big battery pack. Although in the instance of the Dream, it's 118 kilowatt hours, so it's still a fairly sizable pack. But what we do as Move 2 is what really excites me. We can then, as we move towards the pure edition of Lucid Air later this year, we can create a car with about 400 mile range, and instead of needing a 100 kilowatt hour pack as the competition requires, we can get that 400 miles for about an 88 kilowatt hour pack. And that is a very significant saving. It's great for the planet as well because we're using less precious lithium-ion cells per car, less precious lithium-ion cells per mile traveled. We can make the car lighter, more cost-effective, and it's going to have this great foot garage, so it makes it an even more comfy family car.
And the Air, even now, we rode over here from the hotel and I went for a drive earlier today. There's an amazing amount of room in there, and the things that you've managed to achieve with packaging on that car are really impressive. And when we had that first conversation 5 years ago, I remember you describing it to me as having the outside footprint of a Mercedes E-Class, but the interior space of an S-Class. Yeah,
that was the whole construct of the car, and we wanted to take the electric car to another level. So we have this space concept. The car is bigger on the inside, and it's smaller on the outside. And I don't know if there's any Doctor Who fans in the audience.
TARDIS.
Yeah, the TARDIS. So it's a TARDIS, and it's a bit of a space machine as well because the performance is extraordinary, as I think you found out. And it was never created as a 0 to 60 specialist. It was a real performance grand touring machine, and really comes into its stride above 60 miles an hour. That's what we aim to achieve. But the space concept is something which is rather intangible, and it's very experiential. Once you see it and you get it, it's quite shocking. You see the car is much more compact than you'd think when you see it in the flesh, and yet it's got this interior. And we achieve that through the miniaturization of our electric powertrain. By doing it all in-house, we're able to miniaturize our motors, our drive units, our inverters, sculpt the battery pack around the occupants to create this expansive cabin with great legroom in a more compact exterior footprint. And why did we need it more compact? Because, you know, I wanted a more agile car. I wanted more of them to create a Lotus. I wanted to create a Lotus or a Porsche driving experience with a Mercedes S-Class interior luxury. And I think we've got close on both fronts.
Yeah, I would say so. And one of the interesting characteristics of the car when you sit in it, the A-pillars, you know, seem like they're fairly far back compared to what you would find in many cars. You have a very expansive windshield, and so your forward visibility is really phenomenal in this thing. Indeed,
and of course we've got the expansive glass which runs right over the cabin. They've got so that adds to the feeling of airiness, and hence the name, the Lucid Air.
Yeah. So one of the axioms in engineering is you can have good, fast, and cheap. You know, engineering is always about trade-offs. You can have good, fast, and cheap. You can pick any two, but it almost seems like you've managed to find a way to almost avoid some of those trade-offs.
Well, what we've tried to do, and it is a relatively elevated price point. Dream Edition is $169,000 all in, but we're creating a technological tour de force to really establish the brand. I believe that product defines brand rather than the other way around. And, but at the same time, we've engineered a lot of the systems. The powertrain is completely done in-house with mass production in mind. We've designed for mass production. For example, our battery pack are created from modules which are single-shot injection moldings, and they're really like big Lego bricks, which can be made, designed to be made by the million. Super efficient way of manufacturing batteries, super cost-effective. And even our electric motor, we've got a continuous wave winding of the copper inside the stator, which is unique. It's almost made the way stockings are made. It's like a loom which winds the copper, and it's completely robotically assembled. This has never been done before. And that way, I mean, we've actually got literally just 24 laser welds in our winding system. And, you know, I mean, the Chevy Bolt motor's pretty good, but that's got 240 laser welds. We've got it down to 24 through this continuous wave winding, replacing a traditional hairpin type configuration. So that's just one example where we're designing for sort of three axes with our powertrain. One is ultra efficiency to get the range with a smaller battery pack. The other is super compactness, so the space concept works, so we can have the smaller on the outside, bigger on the inside TARDIS. And then the third axis, which is the one you'd least expect, is designed for mass production. Because we're on a mission. I'm here because I want to mass industrialize electric cars. And we're starting with a high-end product. We're going to gradually make our cars more affordable and get the price down. And that's going to be driven by design for mass manufacture.
Last week, you released the first of a series of Lucid Tech Talks, which is a great video on YouTube that you should really check out if you really want a deep dive into some of these things. But I watched it, and yeah, I did. I watched the whole thing. It was fantastic.
I don't believe that.
It was great. I love how you did the math on your whiteboard table. It was fantastic.
Thanks.
But one of the things that struck me in talking about the battery pack design, you know, with the types of cells that you use, the small cylindrical cells, you have thousands of cells in the battery pack. And you know, when you make a battery pack, you have to connect all those cells together. And you talked about, and also cool it, and talk a little bit about some of the innovations that you did that help with packing in more cells into a smaller volume, and how you managed to cool that. 'Cause I think that's a really important part of this.
So we use the cylindrical format cells, and we've got 6,600, and each cell has got a plus and a minus. So you've got a bond, a positive and a minus to each cell. So you've got 2 bonds per cell. So you've got 13,200 bonds on the thing. So you can count over 20,000 parts before you really put all the bits into that pack. And one of the big enemies of battery pack is heat generated both in the cell and the system. And that's one of the reasons we went for a really high voltage 924 volts. But we wanted to keep those connections to the cell, the plus and the minus, as a little fuse for safety. So if any cell gets a little too frisky, it can be disconnected from the system, as it were, for safety. But you don't need 2 fuses per cell, you only need 1. And those fuses, by their very nature, to work as fuse connections, they need to be thin so they can blow. But because of that thinness, they generate heat. And there's quite a significant source of heat in a battery pack, having 2 fuses per cell. And actually, we learnt that with motor racing, with our Ativa pack for Formula E. And what we did there was we reduced the internal heating capacity of that pack for the motor racing by actually putting 3 wire bonds per cell. We'd put 2 on the positive, 1 on the negative. And we did that so we'd halve the heat generation of the positive. And we've taken that to the next step now with Lucid Air. We have different gauge ribbon bonds, which are ultrasonically bonded to the cell. So you have a thick and a thin. The thin is the fuse, which does generate a little bit of heat, but the thick one generates less heat and isn't a fuse. And it's just that little assiduous attention to detail that all adds up in creating what I believe to be the world's most efficient electric car.
Okay. Clearly, one of the things, in the cells that you use today, they're using a nickel-rich chemistry.
Yeah.
And, anybody's been watching the markets over the last couple of weeks and with the things that are going on in Eastern Europe, unfortunately, we've seen a spike in prices for things, commodities like nickel. With the efficiency that you've managed to achieve, do you see an opportunity there, especially as you eventually start to move into lower priced vehicles, to use some different kinds of cell chemistries to help bring that cost down without sacrificing the really impressive range that you have?
Yeah, well, there are profound inflationary pressures, and I think the whole world is experiencing this right now. Nickel is shooting up in price, and we use an NMC 811 compound, so it's very heavily nickel dependent. We saw that shoot up in price on the metal markets even last week. But again, doesn't this just indicate the importance of having a super efficient car that we can go further with less batteries, so less nickel? Now, of course, there is a trend towards LFP, iron phosphate chemistries. I see that as a lower performance substitute, a lower cost, lower performance substitute, and I don't think that's particularly relevant to where Lucid is today, but in the future, it could have its place.
Okay. Yeah, Tesla, of course, is already using LFP for their entry-level models.
Absolutely.
And other manufacturers are doing the same, planning to do the same.
It's a good application.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Given, back in the late 2000s, 10, 12, 13 years ago or so, when the modern age of EVs was just starting to emerge. Tesla had come out of stealth mode. They were delivering the Roadster, got the first generation Nissan Leaf. There was a lot of discussion about vehicle-to-grid integration and how EVs could help bolster the grid and bolster utilities by being able to be used as a load buffer, for peak shaving, and certainly in California, that's an idea that I think a lot of people would love, given the challenges they've had there.
Yeah.
We still haven't achieved full vehicle-to-grid integration, but one of the features of the Air is bidirectional charging, and a number of other manufacturers are also starting to implement that. What sorts of things are you able to do with bidirectional charging, and how are you using that in the Air?
Well, we've embodied that in through our Wonderbox technology, which is V2G, and we've got 19.2 kilowatts charging and V2G. So you can run your house, you can run a holiday home, you can run lots of things from the car. I think it's important that the car features that. It's part of the Wonderbox technology, and there's a world of opportunities from that. Now, we'd like to do, I mean, there are kind of three tiers to this. You can think at national level, stabilizing a grid right across the country. And in that sense, really attenuating the peak demands from the grid when everyone puts their kettle on at 7 in the morning to make some coffee and gets home at night and starts cooking dinner. And then, you know, some of these coal-fire stations are stoking up like crazy early morning, and then they virtually go to sleep overnight when everybody's asleep. So you can balance the grid over a 24-hour cycle at a national level. And then if we take the third tier, and I'll go to the second tier in last. The third tier is just the home use, the lifestyle. If there's a power outage, you can run your home. You can link that with solar, have solar powering your car powering back to your home. And it just adds to your lifestyle and flexibility and gives you that immunity and buffer from power outages. And I would say that this is really good. I mean, we work with, in California, we've got PG&E, and I see them as an ally, which we could do some great stuff and help make their grid more robust, particularly in challenged periods. But there's a sort of second tier, which is quite fascinating, which people are less aware of, and that's for business. And we can do a thing called peak shaving. Lucid, we pay quite a lot of money on an annual basis, not just for the amount of electricity we use, not just for the energy, the number of units we consume, but we actually pay PG&E for the peak usage, the power that we draw at certain times. Maybe we've got all the dynamometers testing our powertrain running at the same time, and we have a big draw on a Tuesday afternoon, say. And that's where we can hook up a whole bunch of Lucid Airs out in the car park and in the workshop, and through the Wonderbox, the cars can help take the peak off the usage from the grid, and that's called peak shaving, and it can save us a bunch of money as well. And we want to do some, I'd like to do some examples, some case studies of this, which I think can apply to many businesses right across the US.
Yeah, you know, for those not familiar with the way utilities charge commercial customers, you know, for retail customers, you know, your electricity usage tends to be fairly consistent, and utilities can plan and put in capacity for that. But for commercial customers, you do sometimes have those peaks. In the case of yours, if you're running your dynamometers, you'll have a peak. Or if you're running a DC fast charging station and somebody wants to fast charge their Lucid Air, there's going to be a peak of demand there. So the utilities have to build in that capacity, even though most of it's not used most of the time. So this is an interesting approach. And the other thing related to the vehicle to home charging, your home power backup, is demand response, where for customers that have an EV at home, if they sign up for a demand response program, PG&E, in fact, is starting a pilot program with a couple of manufacturers this summer to switch off the power to homes and switch them over to pulling power, and switch those homes to pulling power from their EVs, so that they can reduce the load on the grid, and so hopefully not get so many rolling blackouts.
Great idea.
Yeah. So the Air. Well, first off, before we move on, when will that capability be available with the Air?
Well, it's capable. The capability is there in the Air right now in terms of its hardware. We need to make some adjustments to just protocol for how cars can interact with houses and how the houses can be switched off to isolate any electrical workmen out on the street. This has got to be a profoundly safe system. So the hardware is embodied in every car that we make right now, and the protocols for use and software will come in the near future.
And that will require a special wall box.
You need to isolate your house, because clearly if your house has got electricity in an outage and there's workmen in the street trying to fix a main, you want to make sure that they're 100% safe.
Okay. So looking at some of the other features of the Air, you've designed in a very robust suite of driver assistance features, and you've got a lot of sensors on there. Tell us what is the Lucid philosophy when it comes to driver assistance and some of those kinds of technologies?
Yeah, you're referring to Dream Drive, Sam, which we released over the air as an over-the-air upgrade very recently. We've done about 13 OTA upgrades since the car's been out there. And so Dream Drive has been developed with really what we believe to be one of, if not the most comprehensive sensing suites available. About 32 sensors, 14 cameras. We've got surround radar, and we've got long-range radar at the front. And we've also got a solid-state 120-degree LiDAR right in the nose there. So we've got an integrated sensing platform. And also what's really important for autonomous driving in the future is to have this really significant amount of electrical energy available. So, you've got it all with our package, and I think it's a platform that as the software develops over the next few years, we'll be able to progressively upgrade ADAS features.
Okay. Speaking of upgrades, the software-defined vehicle is a big buzzword in the auto industry right now. And this was actually something that really, I think, you and your team pioneered when you worked on the Model S, Tesla. How do you expect, in addition to the ADAS features, how do you expect capabilities of the Air to evolve in the coming years?
Well, it's hard to know precisely. As you're probably aware, I'm confident that autonomous driving, full AD, will eventually happen. I'm very cautious about how quickly that's going to happen. I'm very bullish about the advancements of
it's not 4 months
cars.
or 6 months tops.
It ain't gonna come anytime soon, and this has been very painful for me because I've been saying this for years now. Back in 2017, I was saying it's years away, when everyone else seemed to think it was going to come in 2018. I still think it's many years away, but an inevitability. And I think that all we can do is make best preparation for that with the best sensing suite, the best onboard supercomputing power that we've got, and growing and augmenting our team as we're doing on a regular basis to do more of the code development in-house progressively. And, it's going to come, but it ain't anytime soon.
For development of these systems over the coming years, what is where does Lucid stand on supporting standards for safety? Whether it's ISO 26262 for software side, or just in your policies as far as how you're going to test and validate as you add more and more degrees of automation to the vehicles. What kind of approach do you see taking?
Well, we've got some of the best people in the business for that. Our head of software validation, Margaret Berggraf, is ex-Apple, and she's leading that activity. We have a number of former Apple executives running our software and software validation. So we'll stay absolutely at the forefront of that. And, hear it from me, the safety and integrity of our systems is of paramount importance to us.
Would you ever put beta versions of safety critical systems into the hands of consumers?
I don't think anytime soon.
Okay. That was a question that did come in when I put out a call for questions last week on Twitter. That was something that Philip Koopman from Carnegie Mellon University asked about that.
Yeah.
So over the last decade, a lot of people have stood here on stages here in Austin at South by Southwest talking about automated driving and mobility. And we heard earlier from Hugh about some of the things that have been done here. We've got a variety of companies that are testing here and across Texas and really across the U.S. As you mentioned, robo-taxis are still a rarity. There are some running around here from Argo AI in Austin. And we've got small-scale pilots. How do you see the future of transportation and mobility evolving?
Oh, gosh. I think it's almost like the evolution of the maybe the freeway network 100 years ago, gradually connecting more and more places. Perhaps the expansion of geo-fenced areas where autonomous mobility is a reality now. But it'll probably be a gradual expansion of geofencing.
And assuming that we eventually get to a point where we're increasingly using, say, shared mobility modes, where does Lucid fit into that kind of ecosystem?
Well, I think we could be right at the forefront of that because we've got the appropriate technology. Because once you look at that mobility model, it's about hours per day that you can run. And that's where the efficiency and the charging rates really count. We're the fastest charging car out there. We've proven to be able to take in 300 kilowatts. We can charge 300 miles in 21 minutes. And that's largely part due to our battery management system. A lot of the stuff we've learned from racing, the Wonderbox technology, and our 900-volt architecture. So, it's about minimizing downtime in those shared mobility models. And also, if you look at sort of electric, the last mile delivery situation, that's a very similar model. And then, of course, just the cost of the electricity used. And again, that comes to efficiency. The cost of buying the vehicles, again, that comes to efficiency because it's how far can I go for a given pack size. So let me tell you, I'll come back again to this unsung hero, which is going to define the future of the EV over the next decade. This is going to be a technology race, and very few people recognize this. We're not at a stage where electric technology, electric vehicle technology, and drivetrain technology is commoditized. Those companies that think they can buy this stuff off the shelf, they're in denial. This is a tech race, and right at the forefront, the key litmus for that technology is efficiency. How far can you go per kilowatt hour? And that's what will define the winners of this race. And I think that applies equally into that shared mobility arena as it does to the privately owned car.
And I think it's particularly important in that shared mobility space because the technology to have a vehicle drive itself everywhere is actually very power hungry. The compute
Totally.
and the sensors and
the compute is huge.
Yeah.
Again, it's how you preserve that precious energy. Where do those electrons travel? And that's what we took back to the first laws of physics to achieve such remarkable results with air.
We mentioned earlier some of the commodity prices like nickel going up and why efficiency is so important to offset that. Last week, one of your competitors that started production around the same time you did, Rivian, in their earnings call, talked about some of the supply challenges that were preventing them from ramping up their production. You've made similar comments. How is this particularly affecting smaller manufacturers like yourself more so than maybe large legacy OEMs?
Yeah, I think I have to say it is. I think that, first of all, we've got about 250 suppliers right around the world, about 3,000 parts. And we're kind of limited right now by just a handful of suppliers. And frustratingly, it's some of the commodity items. We've got the highest tech car in the world, and it's not the technology systems that are restricting our ability to build. It's some of the more commodity items like glass, carpet, and some appliques, and we're resolving that. But I think if you go back to the core issues, we were affected by being an unknown company. Not all the suppliers bet on us a few years ago when we were consummating our supply deals. And this is why getting to this stage where we've got the car of the year actually in production has been such a challenge against all the odds. And I look back in 17 and 18, a lot of suppliers didn't want to actually deal with us. They didn't take it seriously. And so I think there's a little bit of an aftermath effect from that. But look, this is a little bump in the road. We will overcome. I think we've got the best car out there, and we are on track for ironing out these deficiencies from these tiny handful of suppliers.
And at the beginning of this conversation, you talked about perseverance, and last night we talked quite a bit about this. I think certainly I think you've got the right attitude to push through this. Tesla obviously had very similar issues with suppliers. It was a different scenario when they were starting to ramp up, but they had their challenges with suppliers not necessarily taking them seriously. And their approach was to move towards more vertical integration, doing more components in-house that other automakers would buy from suppliers. Do you see Lucid potentially going down that direction at some point?
Well, we're already doing that. I mean, a great example is we brought in-house the battery pack enclosure, the box that you put the whole system in, and that's a large part. We were going to be shipping that across continents. We brought that in-house and are manufacturing that now wholly in Arizona. And we're actually even doing that with some other key components. Where appropriate, though, we're reallocating a system to a different supplier. I think vertical integration has its place, but you have to be smart with vertical integration. It's almost become a buzzword, and too much vertical integration is dumb. But if you think you can just outsource manufacturing, where is the value as a company? What value do you have? So I believe firmly in a degree of vertical integration, in welcoming the capex of having our own factory, manufacturing in-house. But there's a degree of vertical integration, of high value in vertical integration, which is appropriate. And to that aim, you could say that we only really make two parts of the car, two systems of the car. We in-house make the complete painted body shell, but of course that's got about 300 or 400 parts. So we manufacture the body in white and paint it in-house. We wouldn't be a proper car company if we didn't do that. And the other one thing that we do, it's actually many things, is the complete integrated electric powertrain. So we make our own electric motors, we make our own transmissions, we make our own inverters, we make our own battery modules, battery packs, and we flash that all with the software. And we also make our Wonderbox in-house. So we truly are an electronics tech company. We design, develop, and manufacture all of that in-house, and always will, because that is absolutely central part of our expertise.
Okay. How do you see Lucid evolving over the next 5, 10, 20 years? Does it remain a premium brand like it is today, or does it become a more high volume mainstream brand? Is it going to be Porsche or Volkswagen?
Well, I would love us to be having the greatest impact upon the environment as possible. That's what drives me. So the more cars that we can make, multiplied by how efficient they are, that's the metric. It's no good making lots of gas-guzzling EVs, and it's no good making just a few EVs that are super high-tech and efficient, and you don't change the world if you just sell a few. So I'd like to maximize how many we sell to a certain standard. So we're creating a luxury brand. We start with a high-end product, gradually make that more affordable, go from Dream Edition at $169 to Pure at $77,400 by the end of this year. And then mid-decade, we look at a mid-size platform, which would be much higher volume again. And by the end of the decade, look, I just want to be making as many cars and having as big an impact upon the environment as possible.
Are you going to stay focused on ground vehicles, or do you see maybe getting into flying vehicles?
Oh, eVTOL's a passion of mine, but I've got to stay focused. Stay on the ground, let's do that first. But, eVTOL's going to be huge, it already is. And, what do those aircraft need? They need gravimetric power density. They need efficiency. And from the batteries, they need gravimetric energy density. And those are the core attributes that we've developed. So the application is just there for the taking, I think.
Do you think that's something that Lucid would do internally, or maybe partner, take your your propulsion and battery technology and partner with Joby or somebody that's already in that space?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to start designing aircraft, but wouldn't it be cool if we became the Rolls-Royce aero engines of eVTOL? Instead of looking out your window and you see Rolls-Royce, you see a Lucid. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. For the ground vehicles, I had one of the questions I got from a friend of mine was any interest in getting into sports cars?
Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I'd love to do a sports car. Watch this space.
Okay. I know a few people that would be very interested in in a sports car that has the kind of performance attributes that you have in the Air today.
Well, exactly. I mean, we've got 11 horsepower with Dream P, and I asked myself, is that adequate?
You only have 2 motors in there. I mean,
well, there's room for one more, isn't there?
Is that something we can expect at some point?
Never say never, Sam.
How,
as you know, he knows I've already driven it.
All right. What about partnering or cooperating with other automakers or other suppliers? Do you see any of that?
Would love
licensing
to. We're very open
your motors?
to it. In fact, a number of automakers have approached us for our technology. Nothing tangible yet to disclose, but I'm really open to it. I want to make our technology available to have maximum impact upon the environment. And if that goes through other automakers, come talk to us.
Okay. On the battery side, you've already designed the complete battery system, and a battery pack is a system. The one area that you haven't done is the cells and manufacturing the cells. Is that something you foresee potentially Lucid being a part of?
Absolutely. We absolutely have to do this because, perhaps the greatest existential threat would be if someone developed a breakthrough in technology that we couldn't access. So we've got great relationships with a couple of the major players. We've got a great supply partnership with LG Chem, and we also have a great partnership with Samsung SDI. We're talking to others right now as well. But in parallel with that, we've already started. We've already recruited the genesis of our cell technology group. They're actually already employed. And we've just committed to the financial commitment for our own prototype pilot cell production line in-house.
Do you expect to stay with small format cylindrical cells or eventually migrate to other cell formats?
Well, right now there's the fundamental and profound advantage with cylindrical format, particularly for high performance. But I wouldn't rule out other formats. I would take some convincing to go away from cylindrical right now. But I think there is significant merit in going larger format in cylindrical from 2170. I think 4680 is a good format because it changes the ratio of volume to surface area. So you get more volume for the surface area. And the surface area, the can, is disproportionately costly. I think that's useful. I think the other big thing that we need to look at is the DCR, the DC resistance inside cells. I think tabless design gives us a good opportunity. If we can go from typically around 23 milliohms down to 10, 11, 12 milliohms in a cell, you have a direct and proportionate impact upon the I²R heating of the battery pack, and it's that heat generation in the pack which is the enemy of efficiency. So I think going larger format in cylindrical, I think going tabless, reducing DCR, these are big steps in the right direction.
What about taking your battery know-how and bringing it to stationary storage, whether that be in-home storage systems or larger scale stationary storage systems?
Well, we've actually started doing that. We have a pilot alpha prototype back at base doing that linked to solar on the roof. And we see that as a huge part of our business. We see three divisions. That's what I call Lucid Group: the cars, energy storage, and the technology applications. So yeah, that's going to be huge. But right now, I've got laser focus of ramping Lucid Air.
Okay. related to the previous discussion on software-defined vehicles, one of the things that we're hearing from a lot of automakers is the opportunity with software-defined vehicles for new revenue streams from services and apps in the vehicle.
Yeah.
Is that something you're also pursuing?
Oh, absolutely. But, you know, we've been incredibly modest with our financial modeling and prospectus. We see this as a sort of delightful, beguiling icing on the cake. But we've not incorporated that in our financial plans. So what you see in our finances is just the sort of base model. It's the cake without all these extra layers, and inevitably those licensing models are going to be huge in the future.
I'm curious, about how enthusiastic you think consumers will be about some of that. As today, we increasingly rely on media streaming services and all kinds of other subscriptions that are keep jacking up those prices a couple dollars a month, and all these things start to add up.
Yeah.
And do you think consumers in the future will be willing to pay subscriptions for all kinds of additional things in their car?
Well, some will. Depends how cool they are and what price point. So that's why we've not been speculative, not baked that into our finances.
Okay.
For that very reason.
All right. The infotainment system that's in the Air today is actually quite impressive.
Thank you.
But it doesn't yet include support for things like Android Auto or Apple CarPlay.
That's right.
Is that something that we can expect?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think we're really push, particularly on the CarPlay side. Probably that will come first.
Okay.
But so watch this space. There are plans to introduce that in the future.
All right. One of the questions that I've heard people want to hear from you about is your most interesting Tesla story.
Oh, you had to ask that one. Well, it was all pretty interesting, I can tell you. It was never a dull moment. But I think, I treasure it in many ways because I wouldn't be here now pursuing my dream if it hadn't been for that experience. That really set the stage and set the platform. I think really the experience there was, it really taught me never to give up. Just never, ever. However bad things get, because it did look pretty grim at stages. When I joined the company, I didn't know. The chances of getting Model S into production seemed so slim and so far away. And it was just challenge upon challenge. I started with 6 engineers in early 2009. And we didn't even have our own office, so I set the whole thing up upstairs in SpaceX, which was pretty empty at the time. And it grew the team to about 25 people. And, really, Model S was laid out and designed by about a team of about 25 engineers throughout the summer of 2009. And it's interesting, actually, Tesla IPO'd before there was even an alpha prototype built of Model S. The IPO took place I think it was summer in 2010. Mm-hmm. And I remember being there. It was surprisingly freezing one night, and I think it was Thanksgiving Day, November 2010, when the first alpha body shell of Model S arrived. And we were going to start the build the very next day, and the team was going to come in at 6 a.m. And I was there with a few others, and we realized that if we worked through the night, by about 4 o'clock, I wanted to get a torsion test result, static torsion of the body shell, before the build took place. So we were there actually testing this first body shell in Palo Alto at 3 o'clock in the morning, when everyone else was celebrating Thanksgiving in 2010. The company was already public when we did that. But it turned out all right in the end, and I think that's the story. We went through some incredibly trying times through 17 and 18 with Lucid. We just couldn't get anyone to invest in us. We nearly went bankrupt several times. We were really close on more than one occasion. And then something wonderful happened, that the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia saw the value in us and frankly rescued us. And then we were off to the races.
Yeah, and we were speaking earlier. You were telling me that in showing the early Air prototypes to investors or to potential investors, you're having a hard time getting them to see the value in the approach you're taking, coming back around to the efficiency thing and the packaging idea.
That's right.
Getting people to see the value in that.
Yeah, because there's such nuanced arguments. What we had, our whole prospectus was that we were going to take the electric car to the next level. And the investment community, and we're talking internationally, no one could see the value of that. They say, well, Tesla's done that. You can't do better than that. No, what's the point? It's already very good. No one needs a better electric car. And what's efficiency? Electric cars are efficient anyway compared with gasoline. And the argument was, look, we can make a more efficient, more high technology electric drivetrain, and we could package this car in a way that no one had done before in the space concept, the TARDIS, bigger on the inside, small. And people say, well, Americans want big cars. Why? You're a Brit. Why you want a small car? That's not going to sell in America. Why do you want a small car? I said, well, I want it to feel more like a Porsche, to drive more like a Lotus. And that didn't resonate at all. This whole narrative that we were going to make a car which like a Mercedes S-Class on the inside and feel like a Lotus to drive, that just seemed like a fantasy. So no one liked the idea that we were doing a better electric car because it was impossible. Then if we were going to do an electric car, well, why weren't we doing an SUV? Because SUVs are selling like crazy. They're taking off. The sedan is dead, so you've chosen the wrong one. But it was worse than that even, because the sexy thing in town was autonomous driving. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we're talking back in 17, everyone said, look, there's going to be fleets of robo-taxis next year in 18. Where are you with autonomous driving? And I'm saying, well, it's not going to come anytime soon, as I say now. It's going to come, but it's not going to come anytime soon. And so you can see how uninvestable we were. We're not really going to take a big leap in autonomous driving. We've not got an SUV, and we're going to do this crazy thing called the space concept that no one could understand or even thought anyone wanted in the first place. And it's an electric sedan. And it was just a no-hope argument. But here we are, and I think now what's happening is, surprisingly, there's a growing recognition of the values of these attributes. And now, only now, can we think of using all the advantages we've made and baking a whole bunch more in to make what the SUV that I'm actually finally excited about. So I'm not really an SUV guy. I like sports cars. But Gravity is going to be awesome. We're going to start production of Gravity in 2024. And it's only now that we can actually get the technology to be efficient enough to make a decent SUV. Which brings me to this whole argument about, pickup trucks and the viability of an electric pickup truck, which really concerns me a lot, Sam. And it's a discussion we've had. Because, if you look today, how viable, how achievable is an battery electric pickup? Is it even possible to do a practical, usable, affordable battery electric pickup truck with today's technology? And my belief is it isn't. My belief is I actually think that the technology that enables an affordable, usable pickup truck today is internal combustion. It's gasoline or diesel. I don't think even we could, with the best technology in the world, make an affordable, practical pickup. And I'll give you the reason why. And you only have to apply some simple math to this. If you look at perhaps the most efficient pickup out there is Rivian R1T. And what does that get, about 314 miles?
Yeah, 314,
something like that.
138 kilowatt hours.
Yeah, that's right. So it's doing about 2.26 miles per kilowatt hour. And that's pretty damn good. And then if you look at the Humvee, and you gave me a shocking fact last night, Sam. Yeah. I thought I'd read that the pack size for that was 210 kilowatt hour, but you corrected me.
It's actually 247 kilowatt hours total.
Did you know that? I didn't know that. Sam taught me this. So you've got, even if you use the 210 and you say that, is it 329 miles?
Something like that,
It comes out as something like 1.56 miles per kilowatt hour. So you think, well, okay, that's a super big beast with a 3,000-pound pack. And the Rivian's not really a full-size pickup. And you think, when you look at the coefficient of drag of a pickup and the weight, is it really possible? Is it really viable for a pickup of a Silverado or an F-150 size to get more than 2 miles per kilowatt hour? Is it really possible? I don't think it is. I think even we would struggle with our extraordinary efficiency. So then if you think, well, the absolute minimum that thing is going to do to be usable is 300 miles EPA, because you won't get anything like 300 miles using that on a regular basis. So 2 miles per kilowatt hour, 300 EPA, that thing's got to have a 150 kilowatt hour battery pack. And even if you can make your pack work at $130 per kilowatt hour, it's more likely going to be $150 per kilowatt hour. That pack is going to weigh close to a ton, and it's going to cost in the 20s of thousands of dollars to manufacture. How can you make a pickup truck that's affordable when your pack is in the mid-20s of thousands to manufacture?
It's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be very interesting to watch over the next couple of years as a whole bunch of these things start to come to market. Ford is going to start building F-150 Lightnings in the next few weeks, and the Chevrolet Silverado is coming, and Ram has got something coming as well. So it's going to be we live in very interesting times. Over the last several years, I've regularly said, in my 30 plus years in the auto industry, this is by far the most interesting time that I've lived in.
Me too. I thought I was born too late. I thought all the fun in engineering was in the 1920s, and I wasn't born too late after all. It's all happening.
At the right time.
It's so exciting.
The time we live in is always the best time.
It's now.
Yeah, it's absolutely now.
Yeah.
Well, Peter, it's been great talking to you for the last hour. I really appreciate your insights, and hopefully you got something out of it as well.
I love your company, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.